Hello, this is Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, and I'm the sales manager of the Porsche dealer here, Porsche Center Calgary. But this is my personal car, at least it was my personal car, and we just sold it. It's going to Toronto, but I wanted to do a little video on it because I think it's kind of an interesting piece. And what this car is it's a 1964 Porsche 356C. So this is near the end of the line for the 356s. They would have made some small batch of alloy cars in Gemund, Austria, I think in 48 and 49, and they would have started manufacturing cars in Stuttgart, in the Reuter factory in 1950, and the car would have gone through all kinds of changes really between 1950 and 1965, which is the final year. But this would be the ultimate or the latest version of the car. I mean, they started off sharing a lot of Volkswagen componentry, but by this time just about everything was Porsche. The body style on this car is very similar to the last 356B, which I think came out in 1960 to 62, and they call that a T6 body. And so visually the only differences between this car and one in the early 60s are that the wheels are a little bit different, and they're a little bit different because these are all discs. So that's the one defining thing about a 356C. It comes in two power plants, both 1600cc, one with 75 horsepower, one with 90 horsepower. This is a 75 horsepower C. If it was an SC, it would have 95 horsepower. Same size of engine, but in a higher state of tune. So that car, different carburetors, Solexes, where this one has Zeniths, and that car would have actually different cylinder barrels. They'd be alloy cylinder barrels, and this one is cast iron. So this car then, with the lower state of tune, the power is lower down on the rev range, so it's a little bit easier, more friendly to drive, which makes this car, there's lots of 356s out there. This car is a little bit different in that it's a preservation style restoration. So what that means is the whole thing's been taken apart and put back together, and anything that needed renewing was renewed, but it's supposed to look like you never even started. So this car came up from the US into Canada as a barn find car. It had all original paint. It was never hit. It had rust in the usual 356 areas, but it was quite localized, and the rest of the body was actually okay. By the usual areas, I'm talking about the battery box, which is in the front of the luggage compartment, and I'm talking about the lower cowl. And what happens is the water and muck and so forth goes into the wheel arch and then collects up there, so they're very susceptible to rust. And then also in the rear, the same thing happens from the inner fender, and then the debris and muck and stuff collects in this area and it rusts out these pieces, and then the sills. So if we look at this car, we will, before we started, and there's a website with hundreds of photographs documenting it from when we started to when we finished. You'll see that you'll see all the different pieces that were new. But basically, this piece here was all new, and the sills are all new metal, and the inner sills are all new metal. But you'll notice on the door that that's a paint chip showing the original skin beneath it. And you can see that all throughout the body. So what we did is we put in new metal, but then we didn't disturb the original paint where possible. So for instance, this is new metal and new paint, but this over here you can see the original chips in the fender, the original marks, the original piece. I don't know, I'll try to focus that a little bit better. But you can see all the evidence of everything that ever happened to the car since it was new. And the new metal was carefully let in, and then You had Cosmos Collision in Calgary do a masterful job of matching the paint. So you've got 50-year-old paint that's lead-based, and then it's a single stage. And now we all have water-based paint that's two-stage. And so what we did is we buffed up all the original paint, and then we matched and blew in new paint. And then what we did is we cleared the entire car to stabilize it. Otherwise the original lead paint would wear at a different rate and have a different look than the new paint, so it wouldn't be matched for long. So then we cleared the whole car, but we didn't want to make it shiny. We wanted to try to make it look like it looked when we just found the car. And so we dialed back the clear, I think 30% or something like that. So then the whole car is a satin finish, and it shows all the original marks, all the original imperfections on every single panel. If you look close, you can see the original marks, and you can see actually the original metal through the paint. All of the character marks, if you will, are still there, and it gives basically an incontrovertible evidence as to the condition of the body panels underneath it. Because if you can see the original chips and the original metal and all these details in the paint, well, there's not 2 inches of Bondo underneath it. The car wasn't, like, these cars were not always super collectible. They were just used cars, and the handling is a little bit tricky. And so you combine the low value with tricky handling and the passage of 50 years, and many of these cars were crashed, rusted, then crashed, and then repaired really poorly. Now today they all look shiny, okay? Like you don't know, and unless you really know what you're looking for and have somebody skilled in body, preparation examine the car, you have no idea whether the shiny paint hides, a bunch of old newspapers and chicken wire and Bondo, or if there's metal underneath it. So the beauty of this car is that it shows everything. It shows everything that ever happened to it. It shows all the original marks on the car, and that it's that the body shell is excellent. But it's a little bit more than that. Lately in the last maybe 5 or 10 years, the idea of a preservation cars have really caught on. The Europeans arguably drive their cars more, and this has been more accepted in Europe than in North America. And in North America, everybody tried to make the cars perfect, and this is typified by the Pebble Beach cars, which are sort of far better than they ever were when they left the factory. The idea of a car being a historical artifact rather than a museum piece has really caught on, and often now the barn finds, for whatever it is, get more money than a fully restored car, even to the point where there was a Bugatti that was buried or sunk in a lake for 75 years. It was completely unrestorable, and it sold for more money than a restored one, and it has a centerpiece in one of the premier museums in North America, in Peter Mullen's museum in Oxnard, California. So when we found this car, we thought we could do a preservation restoration of it too, although it's not so critical on a 356 as it is on a pre-war Bugatti. If you had the only Bugatti Type 57 or Type 35 or Alpha 8C in unrestored condition, or an early Ferrari, you'd be vilified if you actually restored the car, because your car would then be the only remaining car to show the exact coatings and the exact pieces and the exact routing of different wires and all those little small details that sort of get lost in the restoration. So if for some cars there would be no question that you shouldn't restore the car, and like I said, you'd be vilified if you did. With Porsche 356s, there are enough of them around that not every 356 has to be a preservation car, but there are very few around with original paint. And that makes this car a little bit special. So anyway, we sorted the car mechanically, we let in the new metal, took the body apart totally. The interior was stripped out of the car. The seats and the headliner were too far gone. Or sorry, the carpet and the headliner were too far gone. But all the vinyl was still salvageable. So it's got all the original vinyl door cards, you know, the original vinyl seats, all the original vinyl parcel shells. It's a little bit, you know, it's not perfect. I mean, there's some stitching that's come apart and so on, but you can't get this exact vinyl anymore, so we elected to keep it. Carpets, we had no choice. We had to get new carpets for it, and the headliner was just kind of coming apart, so no choice there either. But there is good specialists to provide those parts. Instruments and dash are all original. We've got a remanufactured Blaupunkt stereo out of Germany, and then put in actually an iPod adapter in the glove box, so you can listen to your iPod as well, and it's discreet and out of the way. And this was a nice piece, came out beautifully with the same green lighting as the dash. And anyway, so what we've got, the belts are just new competition belts that I happen to have around, which can be just taken off, or you could replace those as later ones. But anyway, they're there for safety, and then, like I said, you can just unclip those and put whatever else you want on them. Anyway, this car was a really interesting project, and I hadn't done a preservation style restoration before, and I wasn't sure whether anybody would be interested in it either. I mean, I thought it was cool, but I never really figured. You know, I didn't really know if anybody else would be interested or not, and I just did it for me. It's only because we're just starting a young family here, and it just made way for a truck and a travel trailer, vintage aluminum trailer, which might be the subject of another video. But anyway, it's Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, and this is a preservation style 356C. It is a very, very cool car, and it's going to Toronto. And the last thing I'll leave you with on this is that this is a whole series of roof, you know, restorations that I've done, roof Porsches and Alpina BMWs and all kinds of stuff. And I've never felt so cool driving around in a car as I did driving around in this car. I think it's just one of the coolest things on the road, and I hope the new owner really enjoys it. Thanks for viewing. Lawrence Romanosky, Calgary, Canada. 1964 Porsche 356C.